All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking to you. Yeah, it's Friday. It's a free-for-all day, and it's also a special free-for-all. We're calling it an Independence Day special edition of Halitics. Hope you're doing well. It's been a rough, let's face it, it's been a rough decade, 15, 20, rough millennium, right? Rough century. I mean, things started badly. Going back to 2000, remember, we actually had a pretty darn good candidate, Al Gore. I think Al Gore, if he had won, might have been our best president in a long, long time. If he had won, I think he might have been better than Jimmy Carter. I'm not sure. I think Al Gore had some really, really good ideas. And, I don't want to go back. And if you want to argue with me, go ahead, please. Actually, let's say I don't want to spend too much time on that issue. But, look, the guy, he got global warming before a lot of people did. So I give him a ton of credit for that. So we started out this millennium, this century, with Al Gore's defeat, clearly the preferred candidate by a significant, was it a majority of Americans? Maybe a majority of Americans, certainly a plurality, maybe not a majority. I'm not sure about that. And W takes over with Cheney, and this was a disaster from day one. They promoted a war with a country that did us no harm. They opened us up to a terrible terrorist attack. Then they used that to promote that awful war I just mentioned. And it's just gone from worse to maybe not quite as bad under Obama, but still bad. And then Trump, and then Biden, and this war with Russia that will never end, and genocide. And now this terrible, terrible bill, this legislation that, I don't like to I took the position, by the way, 240-242-5646 if you want to talk to me today on Independence Day. And we have a question. How independent do you feel? Do you feel, and I'm using independent, the term, as free, right? Like our Independence Day we're free from England's oversight, from the king directing what colonists can and can't do, become a country. And obviously there were terrible sins, original sins, right, of this country. And the first one, I guess, even before slavery, was taking the land from the Native American, the indigenous peoples who lived here, and just beginning a genocide against them. Maybe it wasn't witting. Maybe the plan wasn't the way it is explicit in Jerusalem to wipe out the Palestinian people. And Netanyahu calls them Amalek. Amalek was a nation that the Israelites completely wiped off the face of the ancient maps back in the day. So Amalek, when he refers to the Palestinians as Amalek, he's saying, hey, we're going to destroy them. We're going to wipe them out. So I don't know. It's hard to go back. Were the colonists planning at some point, or was there a conscious effort to just say, we're going to take everything from the Indians, the American Indians? Probably, maybe not. Although certainly if you look at what Andrew Jackson did, it would seem that was part of he had a plan. He had a plan, right, to just clear the area, to clear the United States of indigenous peoples, or at least the area east of the Mississippi. So that's the original sin. And then compounding terribly that sin with slavery, owning people, enslaving people, stealing them from their native lands in chains. So obviously our country has some very, very terrible legacy. But at the same time, there is in there an ideal of liberty, of freedom, of people having autonomy, making their own decisions how to live their lives, deciding who our leaders will be, guaranteeing a certain minimal standard of quality of life for people, something that we developed over time. And it's really going all out the window. Even, the idea of liberty, of freedom dating back to at least the Magna Carta, where the Englishman is free if he's a property owner. If he owns his own home, he's free from the king. The king can't just go in without a warrant. And now we're looking at this police state that Trump is, put on steroids after Obama did so much to build up a surveillance state, and now Trump is putting it in, making it even worse. Things are just terrible. I mean, this is Independence Day. And yet I feel like we're not independent to the extent we have freedoms. We're losing them. Very, very sad. Sorry to be a kind of a wet blanket or whatever term you want to use, a Debbie Downer. It's just the way it is. If you want to share your thoughts, 240-242-5646. Don't go a full hour. I've got some stories, got a little bit of discussion of what hopefully can be done, and really going after a lot of the usual suspects. I'll be focusing probably more, as I usually do, on the Democratic Party's failings, on our need for an alternative, an option that is, divorced from this duopoly. I'm going to go after some progressives as well. Remember, when I do this program, there's always an assumption underlying it. The assumption is Republicans bad. Now, it doesn't mean Republicans are necessarily worse than Democrats. The underlying assumption is Republicans are bad. And we don't expect a lot or anything much of good. We expect a lot of bad, and we're getting it. We're getting it in spades from Trump. Now, this doesn't mean Republican voters are bad. This doesn't mean the rank and file, the individual voter, I should say, is bad in the Republican Party. I mean, there's good, bad, and indifferent in all political parties, pretty much, with few exceptions. I would argue that if the Democratic Party truly were a party of the people, if it were truly progressive, if the policies that the Democratic Party espoused, and if it meant that it was for the people, not just saying we're for the people, but we really are, and here's how we have shown it, then I would be like, yeah, it's hard for me to how do you justify being a Republican when you have one party that's calling for universal single-payer health care, when you have one party that's calling for peace, when you have one party that's calling for just treatment of immigrants, when you have one party, the same party is calling for protections for American labor, for much higher tax on the wealthy. If you had a party that was calling for all of that and was sincere, and you still chose to be a member of the alternative, the other party, the Republican Party, assuming it was the Democratic Party that was the party that's on the correct side of these issues, then I'd say, yeah, I don't get that. How can you possibly, there's something off, right? But given the choice that the two parties give the American public, I can't shame you for voting Republican. What I can say is you need to vote green. You need to vote alternative. And if you voted for Andrew Cuomo in New York, there's a problem there. Something's off. You got to ask yourself, how did I do that? Why would I have done that? Because you had a really good choice. And you had a really bad one. And you chose the really bad one. So I question that. But between Trump and Harris, you didn't have a good choice. You had two really bad choices. You had two pro-genocidal sociopaths. If you don't think Kamala Harris is a sociopath, just listen to her. Just hear her speak. There's zero sincerity. There's zero empathy that's expressed. So, no, you didn't have any good choices in 24 November, well, between the Democrat and the Republican. So therefore, yeah, I won't shame you if you voted for one or the other of them. There was a good choice. You should have voted for Jill Stein. And in the primaries, you didn't. There were Marianne Williamson? Come on. But in 2016, if you voted for Hillary, you got to ask yourself, how did I do that? Why did I do that? How did I get it so wrong? What's going on here? Now, before I went on the air today, I was thinking, well, or it's not really the air. Before I went on the internet, I was thinking to myself, did I game it out wrong? Because I told folks, by the way, hey, Ari, I see you're commenting. Thank you for that. I told folks I can't always check everything I do here, so I'm going to look, but it's like I'm going out there so people are seeing me, and that's good. I hope they are. Just want to make sure all the tech is good. Looks like, I guess it is. If it's not, call me, 240-242-5646 if you see any problems and you hear that. I'm going to just try one more place. But yeah, no, I don't think there's any issues here. I was thinking, this bill that Trump is pushing is so horrid, so awful, that maybe did I get it wrong? Did I game this out wrong when I said you can't vote for Harris or Trump, you got to vote for Stein? Because I called for people to reject both parties in 24. And the response from a lot of even people who, are pretty progressive, I think who are on the correct side of the policy disputes, right? They do support Medicare for all, for example. Maybe not too many people get why we need tariffs. But at least when it comes to Medicare for all, I think a lot of people may not also get, a lot of people supported war with Russia, which was just terrible. 240-242-5646. Thanks, Ari. Yes, I got that. I'm good. I appreciate that. And I was thinking a lot about it because this bill that the Republicans jammed through is worse than what Harris would have done. It's affirmatively worse. But in the end, I came back to it's a choice between slowly boiled or deep fried in oil. So the Republicans are deep frying us in oil. The Democrats put us in a simmering pan and they slowly turn up the heat and they peel back and they take away. And Obama proposes the big bargain, right? The grand bargain where we're just going to sort of pare back a little bit Social Security. This should be a wake-up call to voters. If the Democratic Party isn't going to champion a true repeal, a complete repeal of this bill, and they're going to provide not just a repeal, but a true alternative that's pro-worker, pro-consumer, pro-life, then you have to look at the Green Party. You have to look at independents. You have to look at Kshama Sawant, and you have to vote. I mean, Kshama Sawant you have to vote for anyway because she's running against this horrible pro-war Adam Smith. A pro-genocide Adam Smith in Seattle, if you're in that region. But across the board, if we don't see a real, not just a resistance to Trump, but an alternative to the corporate fascism, a real alternative, we can't keep doing this, folks. Israeli forces kill over 118 Palestinians in Gaza in the last 24 hours. Look at that date. That's today, July 4th. So we always center the most, the victims who are the most put upon, the suffering the most because of our policies. And no one is suffering more than the Palestinian people, specifically the Palestinians in Gaza. This is an absolute, it's so horrible. Again, over and over, it breaks my heart every day I do this, and I really have I have no choice. I mean, I have to report it. It's just the way it is. I mean, this is the most important news there is. It's beyond words, right? I mean, we do what we can to report, but in the end, the only thing you do is compare it to other horrors. And I do, it's right there with the Nazis at this point. I mean, not the numbers yet, but in terms of the kind of pain, the atrocities that are being visited on innocent people for no reason, I don't want to say, they have a rational reason. They want to clear the land out. I guess they feel like maybe they'll be safe if they kill every Palestinian. I have 6,666 Gazans killed by Trump and Netanyahu this year. Over 3,000, well over 3,000 women and children at this point. 57,224 Gazans and 118 people yesterday. That's sort of a round number. Obviously, it's not final. I mean, it's where we are, and they're constantly adjusting those numbers up. They never go down. Even if Israel, for whatever reason, doesn't kill any Gazans tomorrow, because they've already done so today, the number could still go up because they find more bodies. Democrats do view, and I think with reason, they view this bill, this terrible bill, Trump's reconciliation bill, his budget bill, whatever you want to call it. The media is now calling it the big bill because remember, Schumer changed the name. He changed the name. He took out big, beautiful bill. There's nothing you can do about that if you're a Republican because of the parliamentarian. In reconciliation packages, if provision in a bill doesn't go to the actual budget, then it can be stricken unless you subject the whole legislation to a filibuster. Or the Democrats could have filibustered at a minimum the name, the big, beautiful bill, right? So the Republicans were like, yeah, fine, take the name out. Who really cares? So the Democrats got that. They got the beautiful part out of it. So we're just, I don't know, the big, terrible bill, the big, awful bill. Yeah, please click subscribe. Really need you to subscribe. Click like, want the likes. And also, Facebook, man, that is a big deal. I really love to have the ferment, the intellectual conversation back and forth on Facebook. So do join Halitics on Facebook. That's it. That's the little ask we have, and it's so easy. It's such a light lift on this Independence Day. The Democrats do view, they absolutely view this bill as an opportunity, and they're right to. The American people hate it. They hate all the cuts to Medicaid. They hate the cut. There's a very significant percentage of Americans who are getting SNAP. They hate those cuts that are coming down the road. If they're not explicitly in the bill, Trump's going to cut SNAP. They hate all that money going to ICE. People don't like having thugs, government thugs in the streets, wearing masks, piling people into vans, shipping them to concentration camps and the new concentration camps in the Everglades or to third world thugocracies like El Salvador. And by the way, I want to give Due Dissidents props. They did a very long program where they talked about, they went right into the details of what happened to Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He's now in prison in Tennessee, just how horrific the conditions are in El Salvador, how badly he was mistreated by the Trump administration. So that came, I think, right out of Politico. So thank you, Due Dissidents. Thank you, Politico, for telling us just how horrific the Trump administration treats people. He didn't even, what crime? What were they saying? He was in the country without proper documents? I'm not even clear what it was. Oh, smuggling people? Was that, or was that somebody else? Just absolutely horrific. This is fascism. That's what we have right now. And Americans don't like it. Americans are opposed to it. Americans hate cuts, like I said, to Medicaid. I think Social Security in the end is going to come under the block. We get it. We don't want massive tax cuts for the billionaire class made permanent. So when Democrats see this as an opportunity, they're not wrong. But will they take advantage of this opportunity? And here you see AP and U.S. News and World Report saying it may not be so easy. And the reason it may not be so easy is because the Democratic Party is a failed party. Because the Democratic Party is not in any way. I mean, I know Will Rogers made a joke. I'm not a member of any United Party. I'm a Democrat, right? I get that joke. Ha, ha, ha. I mean, I guess it was funny in the 1930s. But It's worse now. When Will Rogers said that, I guess it was the early 30s, maybe it was when Roosevelt became president, FDR, there was an animating principle behind the Democratic Party. Full employment, Works Projects Administration, National Recovery Act. The government will get involved in making your life better, not worse, not taking things away from you, not building up a paramilitary police force or police forces to roam the streets with impunity. No, we're going to make sure you have enough to eat. We're going to get you electricity in your homes. That was the mission. That was a mission statement of the Democratic Party. Now, no one has any idea what the Democratic Party stands for. The Democrats have no idea. For many Democratic leaders, the tax break and spending cut package passed by the Republican allies of Trump in Congress represents the key to the Democratic Party resurgence. Well, I think that's true. If you can come together in support of clear, easily understood policies that are diametrically opposed to the underlying theme of the bill. The Trump bill is we're going to cut government to the bone except to the ways it hurts you. So no, Medicaid barely enough for the poorest of the poor now. If that, not even that, they're going to have to pay $35 for every, co-pays. People who have no money. Their children will go without care as a result. People will die. That is a fact. We're going to run up massive budget deficits. And, in the end, we'll have to pay for it. Borrow more. Issue more bonds for billionaires to make, a comfortable return on. Well, everyone else is stuck paying off that bill that this legislation, imposes on us. Reduce protection for our environment, which already is under tremendous strain. This just amps up, accelerates the sell-by date that we're probably already past in this country in any event. So if the Democratic Party could come together and say, no, government's responsibility is to make sure everyone has health care, not to take it away from people. Government's responsibility is to make sure everyone has food, a good job, opportunity to work. If they did that and they proposed legislation that would, in fact, result in such a positive outcome, they would get elected. They would win easily. Good luck with that. Good luck with that in the Democrat Party of Josh Gottheimer, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries. That ain't happening. Haley Stevens. That ain't happening. Who's the one? There's a Michigan congresswoman who's very much of a Zionist, very, very pro-Israel. Haley Stevens is the senator, the U.S. senator from Michigan, who is terrible. There's also, maybe she's also the other. No, Debbie Dingell's a Congress. Maybe it's the two senators, two U.S. senators, not sure. The Democratic brand remains deeply unpopular. The party has no clear leader. That's clearly true. Its message is muddled, and core elements of the base are frustrating, drifting. Also, making it harder for the Democrats to run against it is the worst aspects of the bill won't be felt until after next year's midterms. And also, people may not be paying attention. I think people just look at Washington now and they're like, it doesn't really matter. Whatever they do is going to hurt us. They're not on our side. And they're right. They're just absolutely right. So the only way, by the way, Alyssa Slotkin is the one I was thinking of. Haley Stevens is a congresswoman. I said she was a U.S. senator. Alyssa Slotkin, terrible senator. Stevens, a terrible congresswoman. If the Democrat Party unites with a very clear message, we are going to make if you vote for us, if you elect us, if you give us the majority, we are going to pass bills that will make your life better. Now, we may not be able to get it over a Trump veto, so it's going to be a bit of a process. The party has to acknowledge its terrible errors in the past, the policies it's promoted that have hurt people. If it did all that, we could maybe get somewhere. That's not likely to happen. Want to know just how bad this bill is? Well, here's let's see, what does it say? So according to here's what the Democrats are planning. First of all, let me just do that before we mention it's a party is muddled. They don't have a message. They don't have leadership. They're clearly not in any way united in support of poor, struggling, and working people or consumers. But here's what they're planning: rallies, voter registration drives, attack ads, bus tours, and even a multi-day vigil. And guess what? All that will go over just as well as that Fight Oligarchy tour. You can't beat something with nothing. As bad as the Trump bill is, it's something. It's something that's floating in your toilet that stinks. That's what the big bill is. But you can't beat that with nothing. Maybe you can, like for a month or a year or a presidential term, but you're not beating it. You're just preventing the worst aspects from coming back. You have to have an alternative, a vision. And I don't read in that paragraph any vision at all. The only thing they're trying to do is highlight aspects of the bill that are unpopular, that cuts to the safety net that leave 12 million more people without health coverage and millions without food assistance. So that's not good enough, Democrats. You've got to provide people with a reason to vote for you, not a reason not to vote for Republicans. And they haven't done it. They can't do it. They won't do it, because to do that, to say, yes, there is a common enemy, there is something we can do. We can claw back wealth and power from the billionaire class. They won't do it because they're tied to the billionaire class. They're they're profiteers themselves. It's not just the cuts, right? The bill is building a big police state. So I thought the Due Distance Bros were right. If you want to watch their video, they did a good job talking about this. We didn't have democracy before this bill. We've lost our democracy. It's gone, man. It's gone. But now we're really edging right into full-blown fascism. We were moving there, moving fitfully. This is really a significant, sizable move, a step, a big step towards fascism. Will there even be election? They were saying there won't be elections, or they won't be fair. There's clearly going to be rigged for the Republicans next year. It's possible. I don't know that. It's possible. Millions and millions, billions for ICE. Look at this. This is from the Nation. This is before the bill passed, but it pretty much, I think, passed with very, very little. They did little changes in the House. There was virtually none because they didn't want it to have to go back to the Senate. So here's what the Nation reports. The scale of the proposed increases in ICE funding alone make for grim dystopian reading. The budget for detention will go up from $3.4 billion to $45 billion. They say that's a 365% increase. I don't know how they get that. 3.4 billion to 45 billion is about a 14 times more. That's not a 365% increase. That's a 1,300% increase. So I'm not sure. Maybe I don't really understand that. But 13 times, 14 times more money than we're currently spending, which is way too much already to lock people up. And Americans don't even like that. You know, Trump had the advantage on the immigrant question because Americans understood. They saw, working class Americans recognized that the presence of undocumented individuals in this country does tamp down their wages. I understand that's not a popular truth. It's not something Democrats want to hear. They want to argue that all day long. There's no question it's true. If you're a house painter and there's folks who will paint houses for less than you will, who are more desperate than you are, who don't get any kind of government assistance because they're in the country illegally, well, you're not going to get as many houses to paint, or you're going to have to take a pay cut to do it. So the idea that the Republicans kept pushing over and over and over again, immigrants are taking away what's yours, while they presented in an incredibly xenophobic way, their solution is horrific, it's mean-spirited, it's inhumane. The Democrats had no rejoinder, no response. They couldn't say, yeah, we have to do a better job protecting your wages, but the solution isn't to just simply round people up and put them in trucks and dump them at the border. That's not the solution. Here's what we're going to do. And you know, serious, like, we'll have tariffs. We're going to protect jobs from going overseas. We're going to protect labor unions. And we will work with, you know, countries that are supplying us with more, you know, that are sources of immigrants to make things better in their country so they're not going to try to get here. Those were ways the Democrats could have responded. But instead, as the nation points out, the Trump administration's reckless and authoritarian immigration rates have actually produced brutal poll numbers for the president. People don't like it. We're against it. But the Democrats have no rejoinder because they mostly adopted Me Too positions on the issue, calling out Trump's opportunistic rejection of a terrible draconian immigration bill, which Republican lawmakers were contemplating, which, by the way, also Biden and the Democrats were going to vote for. They're like, yeah, we're all on board. And Trump didn't want to give them a win. What would have been perceived as a win, but was still terrible legislation. It was still cruel. It was still inhumane. Maybe not as bad as this, but still really bad. So unless the Democrats can come up with a vision, a humane, caring vision, a vision that leads to a better world for workers, a better life, they're going to keep losing. And they won't, because they're corrupt, because they benefit from the same policies that Republican lawmakers and Trump are pushing. In many ways, they personally benefit, or their benefactors, their financiers, their donors benefit from as well. They, you know, corporations, rich people getting tax cuts. So here's AOC. Is she the answer? She took the right position in the Mamdani race. She did endorse Mamdani. Let's hear what she has to say.
Many incredible candidates, and yet, looking at all of them, they still decided.
So she's talking about the Democratic establishment. There are all these great candidates in the race for mayor of the city of New York, all these great Democrats, Adrian Adams, Brad Lander, obviously Zoran. These were all really good people. And by the way, thank you, TYT, for putting this out there. Instead, who did the Democratic establishment back?
Throw all of their weight behind Andrew Cuomo. The message that they send, and what the political establishment sends to so many people, is that it does not matter your positions, your content, your ideas, how how experienced you are. It doesn't matter how much you work with them. They will still choose their old friends and an old generation every single time.
So that's an incredibly weak message from AOC. That's incredibly wrong. The answer is not they're choosing their old friends. They're not going to choose Bernie Sanders. They're choosing corrupt. They're choosing bought and paid for. They're choosing the billionaire's preference. That's who they're choosing. They're choosing the military-industrial complex, Wall Street, the offshorers, the fossil fuel industry. That's who they're choosing. It's not about age. It's about doing what a tiny minority of the most privileged, the most overfed, the greediest people on the planet want. And AOC won't tell you that. She won't say that. And her failure to say that means she can't solve the problem unless she identifies it, that there are two corrupt parties, that their leadership in both the Republican and the Democrat Party is against you. It's not that they want to do favors for their buddies. It's not that they don't recognize the problems. It's not that they are paid to get it wrong, which is the truth. That's not what she'll tell you. And until you acknowledge that, until you're prepared to fight against the corrupt leadership in the Democratic Party and replace it, the problem will continue. It will never, ever get better. All right, AOC, she's in the belly of the beast. She's a Democrat. She wants so badly their approval. And and by the way, she benefits too, right? She's got health care now. She makes a decent living. Everyone knows who she is. I don't know if she's written a book. I'm sure she will. She's doing pretty well. She'd be making a real sacrifice if she stood with the people instead of the billionaires now, if she took on the Democratic elites. So I kind of sort of get it, maybe. What's Kyle Kulinski's explanation for the failure of the Democratic Party to fight for you?
You're exactly right.
And not just their fight for you, but the success of the Republicans. What's his explanation?
They look at issues like, oh my good, it's the trans stuff. We've gone too woke on the issue of trans people. And it's like, first of all, Kamala literally didn't mention trans people this entire campaign. Like, how could you come to that conclusion? That conclusion makes absolutely no sense. And really, the mindset is like, well, we have to find little areas where we think the right makes a point, right? I mean, they just won, so therefore, they got to be doing some things right. So our job is to say, okay, you guys have a point on this thing and this thing and this thing. And it's like, no, you don't get it. Stop being, this is like weak beta stuff where you follow them because they got the most recent W. You can actually rep something which is the polar opposite with your own narrative and your own story and your own policies that can convince people. And it's that like,
all right, well, so he's saying, oh no, the Democrats just look at the Republicans and they won by talking about trans, the trans people in sports and in prisons, trans women in prison. So that's the issue that won. So we should just jump on that issue because that's where we are. Again, he doesn't say, and then he says, no, you don't have to do that. You can actually propose something different than the Republicans propose in terms of policies that will improve the quality of life for the American people. Except they can't. They won't, because they're corrupt, because they're bought and paid for, because they're not in it to make life better for the American people. So yeah, they'll glom onto the trans issue and they'll say, oh yeah, we were too woke on trans rights, which by the way, they were. They were. But for Kulinski to say, I mean, the Democrats were wrong to the extent they were saying, yeah, we're just going to leave it up to the states or leave it up to municipalities if they want to let trans girls compete in high school sports against girls, that's okay. No, that isn't okay. That isn't right. They gave Trump that win because they never championed working people. But even there, yeah, I don't personally think this is really a debatable issue. I strongly support trans rights. We should you can't not hire someone because they're trans. That can't be a legitimate reason. You can't keep someone out of a home because they're trans. You can't prevent them from going to a school that they want to attend because they're trans. You can't do any of that. But when it comes to, locker rooms, when it comes to varsity sports or professional sports, there are physiological differences between trans girls and women and girls and women. There are actual physiological differences. And yes, there should be some female-only spaces. Democrats got that wrong. And and what Kulinski says is, well, Harris didn't really even talk about it. How does that even matter? Why does it even matter to people? Well, she didn't talk about it. That's the problem. Trump, remember his ad? Trump, she's for they, them, Trump's for you. That was incredibly effective. It worked because people understand intuitively that Harris isn't for them. It's not just that she was silent on the trans issue. She didn't fight for working people on any issue. So it was very easy for Trump to say, yeah, I want to protect your daughters when they're competing in soccer. I want to protect your daughters when they're playing tennis or running track. And he comes out looking like this guy, the serial harasser, he comes out looking like a friend to women. And it's not completely nonsense because he is the one who's saying, yeah, I don't want trans girls, biological males in locker rooms with girls. He comes out actually winning that issue. But if Harris really felt in her heart, if she believed in her heart that Trump's wrong, there are trans activists, right? They're liberals who say, no, no, no. The only thing that matters is gender. The only thing that matters is who you feel, what you feel like you are inside. So if your gender is female, is girl, if you feel like you're a girl, then you're a girl and you get to compete against girls. If that's what Kamala truly believes, then she should have gone out and said that. She should have been fighting for that position. She should have said, you know what? And she could have done it in a way that would have appealed to voters. She would have, I don't think it would have helped her win because most Americans disagree. But at least she would have come across as sincere, as having real values, as having a certain set of standards, as believing in something. But she couldn't even do that. So Kulinski to say, oh, the trans issue is irrelevant. No, it actually was relevant because it showed her, Kamala Harris, and it shows the Democrats as not standing for anything at all, as just simply stepping back when there are fights, when there's an argument, when there's a disagreement, when parents are legitimately concerned about their daughter. Maybe it's nothing to be worried about. Maybe people say, "Oh, girls have more to fear from cis, from boys, from males, than they do from trans girls." Maybe that's true. I'm sure it's true, but that doesn't mean there's no reason to be upset if your daughter doesn't make a team because a spot is claimed by a trans athlete. Yeah, you're going to be upset. Democrats acknowledge that concern. I'm not saying feeling should always be the deciding factor. I do think there are Jews who really legitimately are afraid that Mamdani could allow more anti-Semitism and that anti-Semitism is a terrible thing. I think there are Jews who really are shivering in their shoes, and they're wrong to. That's just not the case. It's not. And the solution to anti-Semitism, to the extent there is any, isn't cracking down. It isn't speech codes. It isn't stopping pro-Palestine rallies and marches, demonizing Bob Villain. That's not the solution. So sometimes you have to, but you could acknowledge and say, I get you're really concerned. I get there's a fear of anti-Semitism. Here's why I don't think it's the problem you describe. And here's what I'm trying to do about it, which I think is what Mamdani basically, although he says, yeah, there is a problem. But feelings you can at least empathize with. Even if you don't think that the parents who are upset because their daughter might not get a gold medal, might keep her from getting a scholarship to, Cal because she didn't win some competition. Maybe you think that's ridiculous. Maybe you don't agree with that. You think their feelings are not justified by the facts. Okay, but at least acknowledge them. At least say, okay, I get it. You're really upset. You felt like your daughter lost her spot on the podium because of this trans athlete who won. Okay. I don't know how you would square that because that seems to me a pretty legitimate concern. Unlike the claims that anti-Semitism is on the rise when there's really no evidence to support that. But yeah, at least acknowledge the concerns of the voters. The Democrats didn't do it. They just tried to sweep that concern under the carpet. But again, it all played into the same exact narrative, which was based on the reality that Kamala Harris clearly didn't care about voters. Not saying Trump did, but Kamala didn't. And when it comes to the trans issue, Democrats are making a terrible, terrible mistake to think that this reflects some sort of terrible bigotry on the part of Republican voters. He was able. So here's Riley Gaines. She gets so much hate. She's just despised. And I'm not a fan. I don't like her support for Trump. I think it's awful. She's clearly, she's Christian right. There are really bad problems with it. But the fact is, she has been fighting to keep female sports female. And a lot of girls and women, and I think most, 75% or more of Americans agree with her on this issue. Trump was given a W by Democrats on this issue. All right, you know what? You can lose an issue or two. And I think a lot of people wouldn't think that this is the most important issue if they had a decent job, if the Democrats they believed were fighting to bring jobs back to this country, had passed universal single-payer health care. The Americans would say, well, I'm sorry for my daughter. She should have made the team. Maybe she didn't get the scholarship that she deserved because a trans volleyball player got one, which, by the way, did happen. San Jose State, there was a trans volleyball player who was a varsity athlete, which meant that a female did not get that scholarship. That's a problem. There's no question that hurts the female athlete. Now, maybe you say it's worth it. We need to do it. Whatever. Have your arguments. But if parents felt, well, that does kind of suck. I don't like it. But my kids now have health care. They didn't before. I can stay in my house now because the Democrats forced the big banks to disgorge their ill-gotten gains. Then they might say, okay, well, we'll put up with an issue, the Democrats on an issue we don't agree with them on. But the Democrats haven't fought for them on those issues. So Trump gets to look like a hero on women's rights when it comes to at least protecting women's sports from trans athletes. All right. And if you look at this absurd take by Keith Olbermann, it just, again, shows you how clueless, how stupid this is just flat out stupid. Who is he playing this to? He calls her whiny Gaines. Again, I'm not a fan of Riley Gaines. I don't like the MAGA stuff at all. I hate it. But the idea is, well, she only got fifth place and she's just all bitter because she didn't get a podium spot or something and she's only a fifth place. She's not even a champion. That's just stupid. You look like an idiot. She was a very, very good college swimmer, better than almost all swimmers. She was pissed off that she shared the fifth place with Leah Thomas. Who doesn't understand that? Who can't understand why that would be upsetting? And I mean, this is just how Democrats lose over and over and over again. It goes to what Kalinsky said. Oh, well, they made fun of us and they mocked us, so I get to go after them. Do you want to win an election? If you do, don't go after Trump's voters, you jackass. Go after Trump. Point out how he betrays his voters. Point out how this bill hurts them. And acknowledge that the Democrat Party is an incredibly flawed vessel that will not get us to where we want to be and lead us to a better place. But he won't do that. He won't do that. He won't. The same thing. You watch Kulinski's videos. He never talks about the corrupt Democrats. Oh, they're so stupid. They don't understand what they're doing. No, they know what they're doing. They're protecting their donors. They're protecting their financiers. They're protecting their golden parachute. So when they lose, they get voted out of office, they'll have a great consulting. They'll have a 7-8-figure consulting job. That's what they're doing, Kulinski, and you know it full well. All right, one more of my typical frustrating libs is Robert Reich. And I know Arlen likes Reich, and I've tried to point out to Arlen the problems with Reich, but Arlen and I just fundamentally see it differently. I'm not going to bash Arlen. I mean, he can see it the way he sees it. I don't feel like this column by Robert Reich gets anywhere closer to a solution. The only way we can possibly, and I'm not saying it'll happen, get our country back is if we rally behind candidates who are going to fight for poor, struggling, and working people, who lay it out, who say, this is what we're going to do. Now, Mamdani did that, right? And what has the Democratic Party done? Everything possible to sideline him. They bought into anti-Semitic BS about him, like Kirsten Gillibrand, Schumer, all of them. Hakeem Jeffries. They pay a little lip service to him, but they won't endorse him. They're desperate to defeat him. That's your Democratic Party. When AOC talks about him, she can barely even say his name. She won't say, oh yeah, it's a wake-up call. She won't acknowledge that the problems with the Democratic Party are that it's corrupt. Here's what Robert Reich says, what patriotism requires. But this is mostly negative. This is his July 4th column that he sends out to everybody. But it's pretty much negative. It's not all negative, but it's not really, this is what we can do. It really does. There's no specifics. There's no roadmap to getting our country back. Instead, he just bashes Trump. And Trump deserves it, of course. Who can argue differently? Trump's awful. But how are you going to defeat him? You don't have any clue, Reich. You have no clue. You know what your solution was? Vote for Kamala. You know what your solution was? Vote for Hillary. How'd that work out for you? True patriots don't feel racist, religious, or ethnic divisions. 100% on that. So maybe you should look at the Democratic Party and what they're trying to do to Mamdani. Patriots aren't homophobic or sexist. I agree. But does that mean they champion trans girls competing against biological girls? I'm not so sure about that. They aren't blind to social injustices. They don't ban books or prevent teaching about the sins of the nation's past. That's all true. They don't abduct hardworking people and put them in prison camps. I agree. You're right. Trump sucks. He's terrible. They don't rob from the poor to reward the rich. They don't cut Medicaid and food stamps so the wealthiest can get a tax cut. Yes. So what's the alternative? Who are you going to say we need to be our knight in shining armor to take on these unpatriotic creeps? Who is it? Who is it, Reich? Is it Chuck Schumer? Is it Hakeem Jeffries? Is it McKinsey consultant? Mayor Pete Buttigieg? I don't think so. I don't think any of them have demonstrated that they're true patriots, that they're going to sack, because what patriotism really is, even more than all the things that you're saying it's not, patriotism is you sacrifice for your country. You give up. You say, I'm going to take a little less so everyone else can have enough. Who in the Democrat Party is saying that? Who in the Democrat Party is going to the billionaire class? You say patriots strengthen democracy, defend the right to vote, and ensure that more Americans are heard. Who's going to fight the billionaire class to demand that? You don't identify anyone. Patriots understand that when they serve the public, their responsibility is to maintain and build public trust in the institution of democracy. You mean like when Joe Biden appointed 3 foreign policy cabinet members who all come from the for-profit weapons manufacturing industry? That's maintaining and building trust in the institution of democracy. I mean, it's a laugh riot. It's a joke, this guy, that he thinks somehow the alternative to fascism is what? Oligarchy? If you would come clean, man. You want to be a patriot? Acknowledge your own failings. Acknowledge that you worked for really bad people like the Clintons. You did a lot of harm. You supported candidates who are terrible, who aren't patriotic. Acknowledge all of that. You don't have any answers. You don't have any solutions. All you can do is bash Trump. And that's fine. He sucks. He deserves it. Except you can't beat something with nothing. America's problem isn't that the nation is losing its whiteness or some religion or too many foreigners are crossing our borders or that men are competing in women's sports or teachers are not. Yeah, I agree with you. Those aren't the real problems. The real problems are that we support genocide, which, by the way, your candidate was full on in support of, right? Our problems is that we aren't manufacturing in this country. And your candidate said that tariffs were a sales tax. It's a sales tax. Our problems, yes, are a paramilitary police state that we're now going deep into. And yeah, that's more on Trump. But it's not like Obama didn't contribute to that. One problem is that too many Americans, including the person who now holds the highest office in the land, don't know the true meaning of patriotism and what it requires from all of us. All right, you worked for Bill Clinton. Did he understand true patriotism? If you really cared, Reich, if you were a true patriot, you would be leading the movement away from both parties, away from the Democratic Party. Now, for those who think it can't be done, no, what are you talking about, Hal? Here's a video. This just came out. This is from, I guess, yesterday. Man, wouldn't it be nice if, forget about Reich, if AOC, Bernie, this is what they need to watch. This is what they need to hear.
Jeremy, one of the things that there's been a lot of talk about is whether...
All right, so this is English ITV, independent television. That's Jeremy Corbyn. I think he's now considered independent, but Labour leader, right? Longtime Labour leader in England and the UK. Here we go.
Will turn your alliance of MPs into a formal party, and whether you're thinking of contesting the next election as a formal party. Where are you on that?
The alliance group of MPs, 5 of us, have worked very hard and very well together over the past year in Parliament, and we're coming up to our first anniversary.
But there's some data that shows that if you did launch a party, you might do rather well.
Well, exactly. So next time you ask questions, ask about the alternative of a left independent party, of a socialist view that's being put.
So are you going to create one?
Let me finish. You're so excited. You just want it to start, don't you?
We haven't got long. The reason I'm pushing is we haven't got long to the end of the podcast.
That's what it is. There's a lot of people all around the country in different independent groups. You look in Birmingham, look in Liverpool, look in Southport and so on. There is a thirst for an alternative view to be put. I'm working with all of those people. That grouping will come together. There will be an alternative view, and there will be an alternative put there, which is about a society that deals with poverty, inequality, and a foreign policy that's based on peace rather than war.
And would you like to lead that group?
I'm here to work. I'm here to serve the people in the way I've always tried to do.
All right, so Corbyn, a little bit mealy-mouthed there. Just looked him up. I always thought he was a Labour MP. I think I had read last year he was booted out of the party. I guess they claimed he was anti-Semitic. It was a load of crap. He's now independent, still won his district. And he's saying, yeah, we're going to put together a coalition to present what he called an independent view. Didn't say another party. I want him to say another party. I want AOC, when she says, oh, yeah, look at all those old guard Democrats, they come together and they support their old buddy Cuomo rather than one of these great alternative, these great progressives. Well, why don't you start an alternate party? Why don't you start a green? You would still win. I can almost guarantee you, AOC at this point, she would gain popularity if she joined, or she could just run as say, hey, I'm working families. I'm not Democratic. Now that's not good enough. You need to be a green, but that would be a major step forward if she did that. She could. Bernie, she will never do it. Robert Reich, get out there. Introduce him. Talk about it. Talk about how the Democratic Party is not a vessel that will ever take on the elites. They will only protect their privileges. They may not protect them. They may not build them even great. They may not give them even more than they already have. But in the end, the Democratic Party exists to set the parameters, to set a hard stop as to how far, and it's not very, poor, struggling, working people, consumers can go to take back power, to become independent again. All right, more bad news. Just thought I'd throw this out there. July 3rd. So I'm getting older. I'm not quite 65, but I'm getting close. And I have definitely noticed how the risks of drinking increase in older age. So as time gets worse and worse, I mean, one way that so many of us, a tried and true, historically proven method of dealing with injustice, unhappiness, autocracy, dictatorship, is drinking, right? You drown your sorrows. It sucks. I'll drink. When you get older, you can't drink very much. You drink, I find this now, 2 drinks, I have a hangover. So I am drinking a lot less. It is healthy. I've lost some weight. It's good, but still, I mean, there's an answer that's kind of being denied us, right? No, I mean, it's not denied, but you should. I mean, I'm not, I don't want to feel sick and gross and fat, so I'm drinking less, but drowning your sorrows ain't what it used to be. I'll be back Monday. Enjoy your weekend. And happy Independence Day.